week's chapter of Bleach, Ichigo is going to be the catalyst for the destruction of the entire Soul Society, and thus, the universe itself. This week's chapter finally got back on track. We got some action, we got Ichigo being controlled by the leader of the Quincy army, and most importantly of all, we got Kenpachi, who has finally decided, enough bullshit, we're gonna stop talking, we're gonna suit up, and we're gonna start planting some bodies in the freaking ground. This week's chapter was really exciting, and yet I just have all of these questions, mostly relating to the Quincy leader and his powers, and how he actually planned on using Ichigo to destroy all of Soul Society, with a plan which apparently involves like a Blute Vein or something like that, or the Blute, which is those abilities that we've seen from the Quincy's where those weird markings go all over their body. And in this week's chapter, Ichigo confronts the Quincy leader, he starts to charge him immediately, and he starts to pull the sword from his body, which apparently is a bad thing because as soon as he does this, all of those markings cover his entire body like a cursed seal mark, and he decides to cut the entire Soul Society in half. When he actually cuts through the Quincy leader, you can see there is this massive cut in the sky. It's going to have some massive repercussions, and a lot of this does have to do with the fact that the Quincy leader himself has basically been setting up Ichigo this entire time. He's made it very clear that he has seen the past, the present, and the future, and he's basically calling all of these shots as they're going down in this week's chapter, which is all the more disturbing. And yet, I still don't really know what his powers are. Maybe he actually is going to be controlling Ichigo. He even mentions that his Quincy blood would not allow him to not attack the Soul King, which is already creepy in and of itself, and this just leads me to believe that we are going to have to get a very lengthy backstory about the origins of the Bleach universe, how the Quincy's actually tie into the Soul King, and why they seem to hold such an incredible grudge against him in the first place. Other interesting developments about this week's chapter is the Vizards. They're returning. In particular, we have Hachi the big guy, Hiyori, we have Love and Lisa, and they're actually going to be suiting up. They're going to get their own Shinigami uniforms, and they're going to go into battle. I think that's really awesome. There is a little bit of humor at the beginning of this week's chapter, but again, it doesn't really do too much for me. And there's also this one scene where Soifon gets really pissed at Urahara, where basically she says to not look down on them every single time she has this crazy plan, or when he comes up with this plan that could possibly involve their deaths where they can't return, and that's of course where Kenpachi comes in. He's like, screw that shit, let's just fight, guys, and I'm totally down for that. But I'm really surprised that they decided to go ahead and get back to the whole Ichigo thing, especially how quickly things are just escalating. I mean, this is really like the big final switch, the self-destruct mode, if you will, of the entire final arc of the series, and I think it's really interesting because now that Ichigo has this Blute Vein going over his body, he might actually fight against his teammates and maybe even some of the other Shinigami in the series. But we're just going to need some backstory on really what's going on, especially with the Soul King and the fact that he had that weird sword that was drawn from his body, which when he gets cut, it can actually destroy the entire universe, or the fabric of the universe itself. Really, we're getting to some world-ending shit right here. So, what's the rundown on this week's chapter of Bleach? We are finally getting back into form here. We're finally getting back to the main story. Things are escalating. It's finally starting to feel like the final arc of the series. We just need some explanation, and we need to set up some final battles. The fact that we got Kenpachi finally coming back, the Vizards joining in, you know we're going to get some interesting battles. They still need to follow up on some other characters as well. But just the fact that Ichigo is now being taken over and he has like this weird Blute Vein going over his body, which could either have to do with the Quincy leader himself, or it could actually have to do with his sword. It might actually have some sort of hidden ability, because as soon as he touches it, that's when it actually starts to activate that move. He pulls the sword out, does the big slash. It's really freaking intense. I just really can't wait to see where it's going from here. It's really just a setup chapter for the big finale of the series, but it got me really excited. I was a little bummed out at first with all the comedy in the beginning. I'm like, alright guys, let's get through this. Come on. But as soon as they got to the Ichigo stuff, I was really, really excited, and I think that's really what made this week's chapter just amazing. So, I like this chapter. It was not perfect. Like I said, I didn't really care for some of the comedy in the beginning, but at least it's all build up for new characters who are going to be fighting, and that's really awesome. And then, of course, that crazy plot twist at the end of this week's episode, that's nuts. Pretty much the Quincy leader has been setting up Ichigo the entire time. So, I'm going to give this week's chapter a 4 out of 5. Really good chapter if you've been following the series. Good artwork, some pretty decent action at the very end, and it was just a good chapter of Bleach. So check it out, guys. Good stuff. Thank you guys for watching my review. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and like the video. And before you guys leave today, please tell me what you thought about this week's chapter of Bleach. What is really going on with the Quincy leader's plan in Ichigo? Did he actually plan for him to destroy Soul Society from the beginning? What's the deal with that weird Blute Vein ability? And what do you want to see from the rest of the final arc of Bleach. If you guys have not subscribed to our channel, you can do that by clicking on the channel icon right up here. It's really easy to do, and that way you'll be able to see all of our latest anime and manga reviews and our brand new podcast show. We just released episode 2, and you should definitely check that out. We will have a link for that at the very end of this video. You guys can also follow us on social media like Facebook and on Twitter, and some cool ways you can support our channel is you can use our PayPal link, which is in the description box below, or you could use our Amazon Associates link. Whenever you make a purchase on Amazon.com, it will help support our channel, so make sure to save that as your bookmark. But as always, the best way to support our channels is to watch them and share them with your friends. Thank you guys again for watching. Super Kami Guru 9000 out. Gotta get rid of those rustlies in the background. In this week's chapter of Bleach...
Alright, I wasn't done.
You bastard! Now I want a biscuit.
Too bad. So wait, here you go. Hashtag hash brown.
Hashtag hash brown.